I always loved this city. It was my home. The city had a pulse, a rhythm all its own. The rumble of the morning trains was a gentle alarm clock. The hiss of steam from the grates on the street was a familiar sigh. I knew its streets like the lines on my own hand. Every crack in the pavement told a story. Every lamppost was a silent, watchful friend. I felt safe here, wrapped in the city's concrete and steel embrace. It was a living thing, yes, but it was a kind thing. It was a beast that had let me live comfortably in its belly, and for that, I was grateful. Its sounds were a lullaby that helped me sleep at night. The city breathed with me. I felt it in the gentle push of wind down a narrow alley. I saw it in the way the sunlight bounced off the tall glass buildings like a scattered smile. Even the graffiti on the brick walls felt like a part of its personality, a messy, colorful tattoo that showed its history. I would walk for hours, just listening. The distant wail of a siren, the laughter spilling from a pub, the soft chatter of people passing by. It was a symphony of life. It was a constant, comforting presence. There was nothing to fear in a place that knew me so well, a place I knew so well. My apartment was perched high above it all, a small nest in the urban canopy. From my window the city lights spread out like a galaxy of fallen stars. I could trace the flow of traffic, red and white lights moving like blood cells through arteries. It was beautiful. It was predictable. The city was a machine, a complex and wonderful machine, and I understood its workings. Or at least, I thought I did. I believed in its logic, in its steady, unchanging nature. The world outside might be chaotic, but my city was a constant. It was my anchor in the storm of life. Every morning I would get my coffee from the same small shop on the corner. The owner, a man named Sal, would have it ready. He knew my order, he knew my name. The people I saw every day were like characters in a play I had seen 1,000 times. The woman with the small, yapping dog, the man who always read the newspaper on the park bench. They were part of the scenery. They were part of the city's familiar song. Their routines were my routines. Their presence was a quiet reassurance that everything was as it should be. The world was solid. The ground beneath my feet was firm. Then things began to change. It started with small things you could easily ignore. A street lamp on my block would flicker out, but then come back on a moment later. Just a faulty wire, I told myself. Nothing more. Then I started hearing things. A soft sound like a whisper carried on the wind. It was probably just the breeze rustling through an old plastic bag caught in a tree. I explained it all away. The city was old. Old things make strange noises. There was a logical reason for everything. I clung to logic like a man drowning at sea clings to a piece of wood. The shadows started to play tricks on me. I would see a shadow stretch just a little too long in the corner of my eye. When I turned to look, it was gone. It was just a passing car's headlights, I would reason, or my own tired mind making things up after a long day at work. But it kept happening. The shadows seemed to deepen in the alleys, to cling to the walls like dark ink. They moved when I wasn't looking, I was sure of it. But to admit that was to admit that something was wrong, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. I was not ready to be afraid of my own home. The sounds grew stranger. The familiar hum of the city began to have an odd undertone. It was a low, thrumming noise, like a giant heart beating slowly, somewhere deep underground. I would press my ear to the floor of my apartment, trying to locate it. It was the subway, I decided. They must be doing track work at night. But the sound wasn't the clatter of a train. It was a deep, organic pulse. The whispers became clearer too. They sounded like words, just on the edge of my hearing. I couldn't make them out, but they were there. They were calling from the drains and the vents. Even the people started to seem different. Sal at the coffee shop didn't smile one morning, he just stared at me, his eyes vacant. He handed me my coffee without a word. The woman with the small dog walked past, but the dog didn't yap. It whimpered, its tail tucked between its legs, and it pulled her away from me. I tried to talk to my neighbor to ask if he had noticed anything strange. He just looked through me, as if I wasn't there at all. He mumbled something about the pipes making noise and shut his door. I was starting to feel alone. Terribly, terribly alone. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The city was not just making noises, it was watching me. I felt its gaze from the 1,000 windows of the skyscrapers. They were no longer just glass and steel. They were eyes. Cold, unblinking eyes that followed me as I walked down the street. I would try to lose their stare by ducking into the subway, but it was worse down there. The tunnels felt like a throat, and the rumble of the trains sounded like a growl. The air was thick and heavy, and it smelled of damp earth and something else, something like decay. The buildings themselves seemed to be breathing. I watched, frozen in place, as the brick wall of an old warehouse seemed to ripple. It was just for a second. It looked like the skin of some great beast shifting in its sleep. I blinked, and it was just a brick wall again. Was I going mad? Was that it? I wanted to believe I was. Madness was a better explanation than the alternative. The alternative was that the city, my city, was waking up. And it was hungry. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were voices. They spoke my name from the shadows. I tried to run. I packed a bag one night, my hand shaking so badly I could barely zip it shut. I was going to leave. I was going to get on a bus and go anywhere else. But when I got to the street, the city wouldn't let me go. The street lights all flickered and went out at once, plunging my block into absolute darkness. The only light came from the windows of the buildings, and it was a sick green glow. The street itself seemed to shift, the pavement groaning. The alleys looked like open mouths, filled with blackness. I was trapped. It knew I wanted to leave. The people were the worst part. They were no longer people. They moved through the streets with a strange, shuffling gait. Their faces were blank masks. They never looked at me, but I knew they were aware of me. They were like antibodies in the city's bloodstream. And I was the infection. They were there to keep me in, to serve their master. I saw a man walk straight into a wall and then turn and walk the other way as if nothing had happened. They were puppets. And the city was pulling the strings. There was no one to help me, no one to hear me scream. The climax came on a Tuesday night. It was raining. The rain wasn't water, it was thick and oily, and it stained the sidewalks black. I was huddled in my apartment, the doors locked, the windows covered. But I could still hear the city. I could hear its great, slow heartbeat. I could hear it whispering my name. Then a new sound began, a terrible cracking, grinding noise. It was coming from the building across the street. An old abandoned office block that had been empty for years. It was the sound of stone breaking under immense pressure. It was the sound of a shell hatching. I couldn't stop myself. I crept to the window and peeled back a corner of the curtain. I had to see. The building across the street was shuddering. A huge crack snaked down its concrete face. It was not a crack from an earthquake. It was a fissure, widening slowly like a smile, a dark, wet smile. The grinding grew louder, and then with a final sickening crunch the facade split open. It peeled back like a pair of giant lips. Inside it was not empty offices and dust. It was dark and wet and pulsing, and in the center of that gaping maw something moved, something with too many joints. I slammed the curtain shut and stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs. I couldn't breathe. I knew what I had seen. I had seen the city's insides. I had seen what lived behind the stone and glass. It was not a machine. It was a creature. A vast, ancient, terrible creature. And the buildings were just its skin. The streets were its veins. The people were its cells. And I was something it had noticed. A foreign body. A morsel it was playing with before it decided to swallow me whole. The whispers were louder now inside my own head. They were laughing. Now I don't try to leave. I just sit here, in my room, and I listen. I listen to the city breathe. I listen to it grow. The sun comes up, but it brings no warmth. The streets fill with the shuffling figures, but there is no life in their eyes. I am utterly alone. I am a prisoner in the belly of the beast. I don't know what it wants from me. I only know that it is alive. It is awake. And it is dangerous. The city is my home. The city is my cage. And sooner or later it will finish its game and it will come for me. I can hear it moving in the walls,